If you haven't bought or sold a house for a year or two, or you're new to the market, then this film is for you to find out the main facts about home information packs for buyers and sellers. I'm about to meet someone that's going to tell me about home information packs, HIPs. But before I do, Peter's going to tell me about the legal requirements. Peter, I know there's been some controversy about HIPs. Can you fill me in on the details of that?
Have we got 5 hours? No, there has been a lot of controversy, and it comes down to whether or not what is currently provided in a home information pack is really fit for purpose. Does it really help the purchaser or the potential purchaser in making a decision? We don't believe it does. But anyway, the fact is there is a legal requirement that you do have to have a HIP.
And what does that involve for the seller?
Basically, if you are a seller, 9 times out of 10, you will actually be using an estate agent to actually sell your property. But it doesn't matter whether it's an agent doing it or whether it's a private seller, in all honesty. You have got to have actually be able to prove that you have commissioned a home information pack before you start to market the property. Now, market the property could be advertising it could be doing a set of sales particulars, it could actually even be standing on the pub table down in your local saying, does anybody want to buy my house? Whichever way you do it, you have got to be able to prove you've commissioned a pack.
Daryl, you're a home information pack provider. What are the compulsory elements of a HIP?
Well, in a home information pack, there's a number of documents that are compulsory. The index, the EPC, the Energy Performance Certificate, a sales statement, title and ownership documents, and the search reports for the property.
Can we just talk about some of those individual items?
Yeah, the most predominant document is the EPC, and it's the one I think most people are familiar with, certainly out of the pack. And the graph at the top of the page is the thing that people are used to seeing on their white goods and so on, and this is now giving people a graphical representation of the efficiency and the CO2 usage of the property.
Right, okay.
At the back of it, or further through it, are some recommendations of how to improve what they found now and possible improvements that can be made to save money over the next 12 or 24 months, okay, and indeed longer.
What about some of the other compulsory elements? Can you talk me through those?
Certainly, yeah. There's title documents, which for a registered property are required. That's the Land Registry, Registry of Title, yeah, and then the Land Registry plan to show where the property is. Beyond that, then, we go to the property searches, which will include the water search, taken from whichever company happens to be the relevant water company, and then the local search, which again is based on the council's information, commonly known as local searches, some known as personal searches, depending on how they're done and where the information is derived from.
Okay. Which parts of the HIP are particularly interesting to a buyer?
I would say in different elements, probably all of them in some way. The EPC, as I say, has got the most exposure from the pack itself over recent months, and that gives you energy saving possibilities and the consumption of the house as it stands now and things that you can improve. So with energy costs going up, that's quite a big element for most people to concentrate on these days, and with the news that at the end of the year that's going to change again, then it could get worse, so making those savings is more use.
Indeed.
Further through, experience shows that things like having a property that's not registered, or that there's some issue on the searches that come back later on, having those up front for any prospective buyer to know straight away saves everybody time, even if their decision might be not to proceed. Somebody else may not find that so much of a problem, but at least everybody knows straight away what's going on.
Right. Now, these documents, is there a timescale where these documents need to be collated by?
Yes, there is really. All the documents have to be within the HIP within 3 months, so they should be no older than 3 months old each within the pack.
As a seller, when do you have to have the HIP commissioned?
As soon as you're marketing the property in some way, so whether you put a board up outside, handmade yourself, or whether you go to an estate agent, you should have a HIP commissioned until the end of this year, 2008. That can be done via a correspondence between the provider and the estate agent or the marketer of the property to say that it has indeed been commissioned and paid for. And that's all part of the HIP regulations, and that changes on the 1st of 2009, 1st of January, that the HIP actually has to be fully in place.
Right, I see. So there's a bit of leeway at the moment,
yeah,
but then it changes.
Yeah.
So overall, buyers and sellers benefit from this system?
Yes, there should be, certainly in costs incurred, and then going forwards, it speeds the process up towards the conveyancing and the exchange.
We also touched on some optional elements. Can we talk about those?
Yes, the main optional element is called the Home Condition Report, which is something that was originally going to be a compulsory element and got pulled back when the regulations changed. There's some discussion that will come forward again and be put back in. And that's a report that is very similar to what people would understand as a home buyers survey, which is the survey that used to be done previous to a structural survey, one less than a structural survey. And that has information in it regarding the condition of the property, and then it's scored, as you can see there. And so most people, when they read the report, can fairly easily understand what is coming out of the report, whereas certainly when I read mine when I moved house, I didn't understand fully and had to ask lots of advice on what the home buyer survey meant.
Right. Daryl, if I'm selling a property, take me through the process to commission a HIP.
Well, most people's first route would be to go to an estate agent, and they would probably have a preferred provider. It's not a bad way to go because they've probably got a system in place where they trust the people they're dealing with. But actually, it's a completely open industry. You can go onto the web and do a search. You can do anything. It's a very open industry. The whole point of the regulations and the way that's been brought in is to do exactly that for the consumer.
And how long will it take for a HIP to come together?
On a freehold property, it should really only take about 2 weeks. There are some exceptions to that even on freehold, and that's the time it takes the water companies or the local councils to get their reports back. And unfortunately, there has been some delays experienced over the last 12 months. But generally speaking, it should be 7 to 10 working days. And then for a leasehold property or unregistered properties, there are some elements of that HIP that would make a difference, purely because it takes a lot longer and harder to find the relevant documents.
Okay. Now, from a buyer's point of view, could you tell me the real benefits to a buyer of the HIP?
Well, the real benefits are you've got all the documents in one place and up front, and really you're not having to buy them as the buyer, which is something that was happening previously. Now that's put in by the seller, it's up front and you can view them as soon as you go in, and it's free to do so. You shouldn't be charged to view a HIP. However, if you did want a hard copy to take home of your own, it's fair enough for somebody to charge for their reasonable printing costs. But generally viewing it within an office or being sent it electronically, there should be no charge for that. So they're all there completely free of charge.
So from a buyer's point of view, as soon as you go into an estate agent's and there's property on the market, the HIP should be in place for you to view free of charge?
Yes, indeed, yeah, once it's completed, yeah.
So in summary, Daryl, as a buyer, what should I actually be looking for?
You'd want to make sure that all the compulsory documents are in place in the HIP. The index, the EPC, the sales statement, the ownership documents for assurance of ownership, and the search reports. Equally, check to see if there's an HCR being done, a home condition report, because that may save you time and money, and it's a very upfront way of a seller showing how and what condition their property is.
Okay. And then also as a buyer, is it my responsibility to forward this to my solicitor? Is that part of the process?
It's certainly very good to keep the communication lines open. One of the things we've noticed a little bit with ourselves is people do forget that part of the process. Our first and port of call is to get the document to the person marketing the property, which is the strictest part of the process. But obviously as you move forward towards exchange and completion, that's a very important document. It's got the documents in that's required by the solicitors. So yeah, get them across to the solicitor, make sure everybody's in the loop.
Right, so it's a matter of communication really.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
And one last thing, we're in a freehold property here, but would there be different regulations if I wanted to buy a leasehold or maybe a new home?
Yes, there are slightly different regulations. One of the things additional to any of the title documents that are available for a leasehold property is you have to have a copy of the lease in the HIP. And then for unregistered properties, you have to make sure you can prove epitome of title or get the deeds, a copy of the deeds into the HIP. And again, that's just relevant to each tenure of the property.
Okay, what about a new home?
A new home has a different energy performance certificate, one called a predictive energy certificate, which is based on more of the architect's drawings and materials that are going to be used to build the house, because of course if it's not there already, there's nothing to assess. You can only do it off the materials.
Okay, well thank you. I hope that's been helpful. We'll be looking at EPC in more detail in another film.